Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with the foremost awesome, founders of EdTech European companies. So basically, I'm Marie-Christine Levet. I'm the co-founder and partner of Educapital. Educapital is the largest European fund dedicated to EdTech. And I will introduce, my colleagues here on the panel. So perhaps everybody can introduce itself and say what is it doing and the part of the international, revenues and or international activities in its own company.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Anton. I'm the CEO and founder of Headway. In Headway, we believe that we live in an age of distraction right now. Tech has cut up the day into smaller pieces, and people just don't have long stretches of uninterrupted time. That's why we provide bite-sized, gamified, compulsive learning. Why? Because I think when people don't learn, it risks them missing opportunities in their life. So now we have several apps already. So Headway is the main app, non-fiction book summaries. Another app is Impulse. It's cognitive development. So we are mobile first. Why apps? I think it's important because people have smartphones always with them and they can learn whenever they have spare few minutes. So
I think you can say how much download you have.
Yeah,
it's quite impressive.
So now across 3 apps, third we just launched. It's kind of soft launched. We have 40 million downloads, and our main market. So the theme of this panel is European EdTech seeking the global stage. So basically, in a way, we have found it already. We have like 65% of our revenue coming from the United States. Yeah, so that's that.
Okay, then we go to Sana Labs B2B. So
hello, everyone. John Lexa, president at Sana Labs. I'm actually American, so I'm probably the least qualified to speak about European EdTech seeking the global stage. But before you get too disappointed, I've lived in Europe since 2014, so I have some knowledge on what it takes to expand to the global stage. A bit about Sana. So the problem that we're solving is that learning and knowledge sharing has typically been treated as 2 separate things for companies. You have learning management systems, learning experience platforms, authoring tools, etc. And then you have knowledge sharing tools like Notion or productivity tools like Slack. But learning and knowledge sharing are fundamentally very similar, right? They're the same thing. You need access to information to help you do your job. With Sana, we're building a bridge between the two. And building a platform that effectively captures, organizes, stores, and surfaces the knowledge that employees need to do their jobs in a neat way. We're a Series B startup based out of Stockholm, Sweden, grew 3x last year, looking to expand into the US now, where currently around 20% of our revenue is. And given that US is one of the biggest single markets in the Western world, we're incredibly excited about it.
Pierre is one of the most successful French, EdTech joined to the US. So we're very proud of him in France.
Thank you. So my name is Pierre. I'm one of the 2 co-founders and the CEO of OpenClassrooms. Started this company about 10 years ago in Paris. I'm now based in New York. So OpenClassrooms is a mission-driven company. We're B Corp certified, and the mission is to make education accessible. So it's at the crossroad of higher education, workforce development. So we basically are a degree awarding entity, a college in Europe. We offer upskilling, reskilling, and apprenticeship programs on new jobs and new skills such as technology, IT, and cyber, and so on. We sell to businesses and governments mostly, and that's kind of our play, B2B and B2G play. And we track the social impact we're having through the number of career outcomes we create through our program. So that means we placed, for example, last year 44,000 students in the workforce, either for the first job or new careers, career mobility, generally speaking. We started in France initially, and we have students now in 100+ countries. Mostly it's Europe and the US, and that's 40% international for us. And yeah, I moved to the US about 2 years ago to re-accelerate developments in the States.
Felix, GoStudent.
Yes, GoStudent is a tutoring company. We connect children in the age of 6 to 18 to world-class teachers, either in an online setting, mostly one-on-one online tutoring, or by now we also run 1,000 physical tuition centers where we offer offline tutoring or some hybrid solutions. We sell about 1 million to 2 million of these tutoring sessions every month. So in terms of revenue, in the tutoring industry in Europe, we are the largest one, and about more than 50% is coming from outside of Germany and Austria. Germany, Austria are our core markets. More than 50% come from outside. We had, during our rapid expansion phase from 2019 to 2022, we operated in more than 20 markets. In the meantime, we closed down about 7 markets. So we closed down the US, LATAM, Canada, and Sweden. And we are focusing now on our 15 most profitable markets, mostly in the European area.
What I want to ask you is that, we often read and hear that it's quite difficult to do international because there's a lot of language barriers, there's a lot of regulatory barriers. What was the case for you, and when did you start to think about international? Did you first develop the company in your own country and then decided? At what stage of the company did you have the international mind? I don't know who wants to take the question.
Yeah, let me start. So actually we started with like our target market, United States. It's the biggest market, and what helped us to start with the US, which is quite hard, given that we were launched out of Ukraine, actually, and like our company, the majority of our people are still in Ukraine, they're in Kyiv. So we relocated everyone who wanted to. We have opened an office in Warsaw after the full-scale invasion started. We have opened an office in London even before the invasion started. And still around 80% of people, they are in Ukraine. So we started with like 100% of people in Ukraine. And what allowed us to do that? Platforms. So platforms like Apple App Store, Google Play Store, Meta, so both like stores, Google and Apple, and Meta, TikTok and other platforms, they help with distribution. So okay, you can make your product work, but build and they will come, it never works, right? So some people, they are talking about product-led growth, that's great. It may work for some products, multiplayer products, right? But if your product is single player, then product-led growth just doesn't work.
And are you in multi-languages or just English?
Well, we started with just English, focusing on, so we started one language, one country, like focusing on the United States. So like the pricing, everything was tailored towards the United States, and like focus, especially in the beginning, is crucial. It is very important because otherwise you're just like spreading too thin. So yeah, we started with just English, but right now we diversified into several products, several applications. Like why I'm talking about applications? Well, mobile first approach, I think, for lifelong learning, especially when people are not sitting in a room listening to someone. Yeah, that works. That's why we are on apps. Then we diversified into several products, several languages. So now we're investing into our geo expansion, but focusing on Spanish, for example, given that English is around like 80% plus of our revenue, with 65 United States.
And Pierre and Joe, for your company, you started in your own country. When did you decide to do international, and what was the most difficult?
Sure, I can start. So many of you may know this, but Sweden is a pretty small country. It's around 10 million people. So if we decided to stay there, we wouldn't really generate that much revenue over time. So I think the Swedish mentality when it comes to business has always been very international. For us in particular, we've been international from day one. We got the opportunity to partner with Mount Sinai Hospital in New York during the pandemic to upskill over 100,000 healthcare workers globally on how to effectively treat for COVID-19. We partnered with Novartis, Amgen, Amazon as well from the early days. And that's very much been part of the DNA when it comes to doing business. I definitely agree with the perspective of having to focus from the beginning. With that in mind, our solution has, it's presented in English, the UI is in English. In Sweden, most people speak English. And for B2B, I think it's a bit easier given that our customers are global organizations where they're used to operating with the international mindset.
And did you expand to other European, countries before the US or directly to the US? What was the road to expansion?
Yeah, no, it's a bit more ad hoc. I would say we've found success in other parts of the Nordics, the UK as well, and then in France, we've had a great grassroots adoption. And I think there's something around finding those right partners in France who then speak to their peers and other companies, and then they end up buying the same solutions. But there are a lot of challenges, I think, for us ahead, and historically when it comes to expanding internationally. I mean, going back to the point around Sweden, most people thought Spotify was from Switzerland, and when you think of Sweden, you think of like IKEA and meatballs. You don't really think of B2B SaaS. So for us, the biggest challenge, I think, when expanding internationally, and especially America, is just the awareness gap. How do we establish ourselves in an incredibly competitive market? Coming from a country that most people aren't too familiar with, and claim the kind of the title as the de facto leader in our space.
And Pierre, you had quite an innovative product in France. When you went to the US, you had like regulatory barriers and constraints. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we're on a highly regulated market, so we're a degree granting institution, so we need license in every country we operate, we need degree accreditation, we need another license to run apprenticeship programs, and so it's very complex and country specific. Obviously there is, language, content and all of that that requires also like pretty big investments, which we did like not from the get-go, but like fairly early in the journey. We went first in the UK, also in Europe, and then to the States. For us, it's a multi-year process to really like get all of the accreditation and licenses. Kind of similar journey as like creating a bank, if you will. Like you need state licensure in every state one by one. So very long journey, but I would say if you do have like an innovative product, especially like the one we build in Europe, ingrained in like the apprenticeship culture of Europe, brought to America, adapted to local constraints and requirements, actually is very different from what you would find here. So there is a path, but for us, like the main challenge was probably regulatory and like public policy, I'd say.
And Felix, when did you start thinking international? And a lot of B2C companies, European B2C companies, when they go to the US, they have to face increasing customer acquisition costs. What was the case for you, and how did you manage the internationalization?
As mentioned, I think if you start an education company in Europe, you need to think global from day one, because the markets are for itself just too small. And I also strongly believe this puts the European companies in a really, really strong position, actually. Because this is a position that Chinese companies, Indian companies or US companies don't have, because they have this big kind of homogeneous market in which they focus, but European players are global from day one. And also in the App Store, right? Think about it, like, I don't know, a company like Photomath, right? It's a Croatian company. A company like Kahoot, for example, is also like a European company. Headway, Sana Labs, OpenClassrooms. Like we have actually out of Europe, I think we can be much more self-confident about our abilities. And also in terms of revenue, if you look at the biggest education companies globally, they're not from the US. Take a company like EF, Education First, founded by actually a Swedish person, Bertil Halt, doing a couple billion in revenues. I think overall building an education company out of Europe is a big advantage, and we should be much more confident in this story and how we present it. Yeah.
And I guess there are some entrepreneurs in the room, that perhaps at an earlier stage than you. What will be the advice you will give them, to go international, to think big for them?
Yeah, I'd say the US is not like the only market in the world, even though like it's obviously one of the largest markets in education, but it requires also like usually significant capital, more competitive space as well. So the first question I ask myself is, do I need to go to the States? If I start, in Europe, and you can create an amazing European company, you can go to Asia, you can go to Africa, LATAM. So there are many other markets, depending on the ambition and the kind of story you want to build. But if you do want to go to the States, I'd say early on our journey, we onboarded also US investors who were pretty helpful for us to, start developing the States. I moved also as well, so we're two co-founders, and my other co-founder is in France. So I'd say capital, having one of the founders probably locally and starting to be really emerged in the market is definitely like highly recommended.
And if you had to give advice, would you advise, to go from one European country to other European countries, or the effort is the same than going to the US?
I think we looked at this quite a lot when we were thinking about expansion, and we evaluated France, we evaluated Germany, the UK as well, and we went still with US being the place where we wanted to invest the most. However, we did a soft kind of launch in the UK first, given that time zones were a bit easier to manage. It had a similar language as well as the US, so it was a great way to try and test our go-to-market as we expanded internationally. And then France, I think for us, came about more through this grassroots momentum that I mentioned earlier, which is great, but we haven't really invested that much in our marketing and sales there. And
we see India, becoming one of the major places, of EdTech. And basically, we don't see that many, either even US or European companies going to India. Why? And did you think about, mainly for the B2C, did you think about India?
I mean, the competition there is just much, much higher. So also, I mean, just in our industry, in the tutoring industry, when we launch a new market, we do this in a very like simple, pragmatic way, right? You run your performance ads on Google, on Meta to get your first customers on board, and then you scale it up. If you just compare the prices that we would pay on the same keywords in India, it's just exponentially higher than in a market where you have less competition. So that's, at least for us, one of the reasons why it's, as of today, not interesting, but maybe in the future there's an acquisition potential or a company that understands the local market even better than we do, that we can acquire. That's how we see it.
Yeah, I would like to go back to the previous question about the advice. So it is hard, but don't be discouraged. I think that definitely now it's much easier than before. So we have lots of tools that help to do customer development. Like people are more okay with Zoom calls instead of meetings in person. Of course, I think meeting in person is very important, but you can start by Zoom calls, by doing online. Some products they provide you customer insight capabilities to interview customers at scale. That's something that you can do, but distribution. It is very important to get how you will get customers, and think about your advantages, your experience, your network. If you can tap into some of those, that's the way to start. And then, of course, iterate, fail fast. That's the advice.
One question regarding access to capital. What stage of the company, mainly for, do you think you can go mainly in the US, and what about the having links with US funds and being financed by a US fund? Do you think it's necessary at one point of the life of your company to enter the US?
Yes. I think it is, and quite frankly, like especially in a late stage environment, like most of the capital comes from non-European funds, and US funds are obviously a big part of that. They've been very helpful for us. We welcomed to our capital like more than 5 years ago, General Atlantic, Joint Security Initiative, Salesforce, and GSV as well. So a bunch of major US funds. They've been super helpful to us to open networks and access to talent and partners and universities and many other things, to pick their brain also on higher ed and our markets. I think to build a very successful company in the States, it's likely you need to have like some financial partners early in the journey. The good news is getting easier and easier to do that from Europe, honestly. And I don't know, 15 years ago, you could not have access to those US funds. If you had access, probably that you move the company to the States basically and flip that over. That's it. Now I think it's quite usual. You have most US funds have like some sort of like Paris, London location and teams, and so it's getting way easier. And I definitely recommend it.
And Pierre, you moved to the US. Do you think it's necessary that one of the founder moves? And what about Sana Labs? Do you is one of you we move here? Or?
Yes, I'm moving back to the US. But yeah, I think it's helpful to have a founder. I mean, it's almost a prerequisite, I would say, given how important market expansion is and how easily it is to mess it up if you don't have the presence.
And at which stage of the company can, because often companies are still small, and then if you have one of the founder that leaves the country where he founded the company, it can be a mess in his own country. At which stage of the company do you think one of the founder can leave?
Yeah, so we're exploring it now. So post Series B, we closed our Series B in December. I think it depends a bit on the business model and the go-to-market. For B2B, they typically say around the Series B stage, you want to start to explore the next big market. And going back to the point on access to US funds, totally agree with Pierre that it's much easier to raise from Europe nowadays with a lot of the US funds like Cotu, Sequoia. I mean, all of them are opening up offices in Europe, given that they see the potential there. But we were pretty thoughtful about when we wanted to go raise from a US fund, given that it does become a force in pulling you to the US very quickly. It's just somehow, I don't know how it happens, but they just start to invite you to things. Next thing you know, you're connecting with, in our case, through B2B, to prospects in the US, going to these conferences in San Diego, and all of a sudden, whatever you wanted to maintain in terms of culture, in terms of that kind of heritage that you've built up in your European capital, that suddenly starts to change quite rapidly. So one should not take it lightly. It's definitely a pretty big decision to make, and we were fortunate enough to raise from a Swedish VC for a Series A, and that was fantastic. I mean, they went on vacation in July, and everybody else went on vacation too.
And perhaps we can open questions to the room.
What's the B2B?
So like direct to schools, channel, not channel. Yeah, I can take it out. So we sell a lot in B2B, both indirect through channel partnerships and indirect sales, enterprise and mid-market. So wide experience in that. It's quite different, I'd say, from Europe, especially I'd say enterprise sales in B2B. Is usually way more processed and like verticalized and specialized in terms of jobs and skills. So in Europe, you would typically have like one person doing kind of all of the sales process, or maybe like 2, and you have like a BDR and an account manager, and that's pretty much it. I'd say the way you organize now in the States is way more specific and granular and precise. So kind of different skill set and culture and mindset as well. It's more competitive, generally speaking. So the level of standards and requirements by enterprise clients is also like way higher, I find. So expect that. It's good, I guess, because if you reach that level, you can also re-import it back to Europe and Scotland and like sell to your B2B clients here in Europe with higher quality product. And we've been quite successful with channel partnerships as well. So it's been a great addition in the States. So we go both indirect and direct to consumers. Then you talked about schools. I don't know if you talk about like school districts in the States. So I'm sure like plenty of people in the room and elsewhere in this conference will have much more experience than me in like selling to school districts. But it's a more like granular approach, very scattered and like person-to-person kind of sales process, lots of like local lobbying and so on. So I'd say that's more of like a B2G approach that is also harder to crack and takes a long time to really establish. So different types of sales behind that.
Ilonka Jankovic from Rubio Impact Ventures. My question is, how do you integrate or how do you envisage to use ChatGPT?
Yeah, that's actually like one of the differences, I think, at least like going from Ukraine to States here. I've been here for 3 weeks, so I think that like all the talk about ChatGPT, generative AI here, it's much more about talks about that. Everyone is thinking about that, so the context is definitely like just this one. Like everyone's funding those companies, talking about how to integrate. So I think there are like 2 approaches. First one is to integrate ChatGPT in your like existing workflows, and I think that like almost everyone is doing it at some point, and I think it's important to just educate people in our companies how to do it best. And of course, for that we need to understand how to do it ourselves. So like learning and development, if you have one in your company or like CEO assumes that responsibility, then someone definitely should push for that. And another one is just like some more disruptive way how to like maybe rethink your business model and integrate generative AI in your business model. That's something that we're definitely thinking about, but this second way is much harder one. So like experimenting right now with that.
And do you mean like when you say workflows, integrating it for your own internal processes or for the products and services that you're selling?
Marketing would be one example. So like we started even before ChatGPT with like Jasper AI and others. So and it proved a success for us. And right now, I think that it's accelerating. So we not just text and marketing messages, but also images, video, something that already some people are doing like for marketing purposes. It's lo-fi, but in marketing, lo-fi sometimes it's good because it looks more down to earth. It's not as like highly like, produced like something that influencers are doing. So yeah, I think that marketing specifically is that something that you should think about.
Yeah, GPT-4 helped write our strategy document.
And Felix, how do you see? Do you see a potential competition in the tutoring?
It's actually, I think, the best comment I've heard so far on this topic. how to use it, because I fully agree. It should start with yourself and how the people in your organization use it. Because the use cases are still too much scattered to really understand in the education sense. I give you an example. We have in the UK, we run a business called Seneca. It's used by 4 million kids on a monthly basis, where teachers create assignments to kids. And then the kids do these assignments in the afternoon. It's a highly used product. Lots of kids love it. We introduced like a virtual tutor based on GPT, and the usage was really bad. Yeah, so the retention curves after like 1-2 use cases was just not there because kids struggle formulating questions. Yeah, and then we switched the use case to teachers to automatically create lesson plans for them, just to increase their productivity and save time on it. So I think bottom line is, I think many use cases will definitely develop out, but I fully agree with what Anton said. It starts with how you, on your own and within your organization, identifying like really actual use cases and not just some blah blah of what might be nice and whatnot.
May I add to that?
Yeah.
I think you brought up a good point. So the advancements now that we're seeing in large language models are so fast that as a company using that service in the products that we're selling to partners, we can't really build a defensible moat around the underlying infrastructure of large language models. Everybody has pretty much access to it now. And what's more important is the point that Felix made around the application or the use case. So we're investing a lot more in the user experience to ensure that wherever somebody goes in the product, the use of an LLM makes a lot of sense. And it's not just a generic kind of gimmicky, ooh, this is cool because it's new type of experience. And also, we're building the product to be able to move incredibly fast so that whenever there's new updates to a model or a new model released, then we can plug it in and not have to kind of deprecate a lot of old like fine-tuning code that's put in place for previous models. So I think the way that people are building products will also change quite a bit.
Yeah, I have a last question for you. You know, we are in a learning conference, and often, you know, we learn a lot from our mistakes. You've been building quite successful companies, the four of you. But what would you have done differently?
In our case, we actually lost a lot of time not listening to our customers. Yeah, so in the beginning, when we started our first product, my co-founder and myself, we often had this mentality that feature would be nice because that will solve our growth problem and then it will explode. Yeah, always this kind of mindset, what we would find like a good next feature to develop to launch something, and less working really more closer with the customers and also understanding especially in education, right? In education, the amount of business models is quite limited. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel on the business model side. You need to look, where do people or companies really spend money on? If they don't spend money on certain services, it's going to be extremely hard for you to build a service around it when nobody's willing to spend money on it. So really like understanding a concrete business model and use case. And there are not that many out there. There are not many companies out there in the space that do a lot of revenue. And understanding and listening to your customers. We would have done much earlier and would have saved some time.
For me, it would be the go-to-market in B2B. We started as a purely B2C company and pivoted towards B2B over the years. We're now majority B2B. And the way we did that is by going straight to enterprise accounts, really large, like Fortune 500 type companies. And we, after many years and lots of losses and capital intensity, I'd say we managed to get there. But looking back at that, I think I would do it differently now. I would probably like target more mid-market and SMBs first. Would be much more capital efficient, and then from there, like kind of build up the next layers of services and features that you need to enter enterprise accounts, which are sexy on paper, but also like really, really hard to crack with a specific level of requirements. So that'd be my kind of takeaway and lesson learned.
Yeah, on a similar note, and a point that Anton brought up in the beginning, focus. I think we could have been better at focusing in the beginning. B2B go-to-market, we started with a dual go-to-market where we went after enterprise customers and mid-market. And I would not recommend doing that because then you have to develop 2 sets of collateral. Sales reps have to then understand 2 different narratives. It just complicates things so much. So focus is key, and just simplify things and do one thing really well first and then move on to the next.
For us, would be finding a partner in terms of venture capital partner earlier. So we are bootstrapped. We raised out of venture builder, venture studio, seed funding. Otherwise, we are funded by our customers. So we are profitable from the second year of our operation. Unit economics profitable from the get-go, from the start. So we're growing at fast pace. But now, as we are at a later stage, it is increasingly hard to launch new channels like B2B. We're now developing B2B. Then other channels, like partner channels, channel sales. So that's something that we're struggling with in a way. And I think that a good partner on board would have helped us. We would be now growing faster if we would. So now we're doing that, but yeah, that should have been done earlier.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes. Perhaps last word. Your biggest challenge and what prevents you from sleeping, or what makes you wake earlier.
Growth, I think. I think every entrepreneur, every CEO, that's something that keeps me awake. How to grow, how to accelerate our growth, and actually, our mission is to help people grow. And I believe that many of us here are really passionate. I'm sure all of us are really passionate about education, about opportunities that it opens for people. So growth in terms of business, but also growth that we can bring to our customers.
Yeah, a related note, awareness. Helping people be aware of who we are, and then also through that interaction, learning from them and understanding customer needs better.
Yeah, for us, it's on a different, I'd say, angle. We're seeking degree accreditation in the States, so it's a pretty big piece for us, and we're actively working on that. So that's one of the main projects I'm working on with the team.
For us, right now, it's also a bit the question, growth versus profitability. I know this is also one of the topics everybody was talking about over the last year, profitable growth, or whatever that means. Yes, understanding or finding a balance, how aggressive do we want to grow in the markets in which we currently operate versus the profitability. Do we want to raise additional funding for some potential acquisitions? Are we waiting out on that? Making sure that the people within our company that they stay really engaged and they give 150% on a daily basis. I would say these are a couple of topics that give me some sleepless nights. So can take some sleeping pills.
Great. I don't know if there's a last question from the room or advice or. Okay, so good luck, for your profitable
Thank you.
growth.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.